I'm Amy Seitz, editor of Gardening How-To magazine and executive director of the National Home Gardening Club. A lot of times when you read about plants in a magazine like Gardening How-To, or you look at plant labels, it'll tell you that the plant needs full sun. But what exactly does full sun mean? Does that mean the plant has to be in the sun all day long? The generally accepted definition for full sun is 6 to 8 hours. Now, if you put a plant that needs full sun in an area that gets less than full sun, that doesn't necessarily mean the plant is going to die. But it won't be as vigorous, and it won't have the fruit or the blooms that you expect from it. It'll also tend to get leggy, which means it doesn't have that healthy, attractive look. It gets kind of long and lanky, like an awkward teenager. Full sun is especially important for vegetables. And again, your tomato plant isn't going to keel over and die if it gets, say, 4 hours of sun. But you're not going to get the fruit that you want. And after all, that's the whole point of having a vegetable plant. In case you've ever been tempted to kind of push it, to say, well, I get about 5 hours of sunlight, so that's close enough. Let me show you something. Take a look at this tomato plant. The foliage is really bushy and really healthy, and it's got all kinds of fruit. Some of it's ripe, some of it's still ripening. It's exactly what you would hope for from a tomato plant. And this one is in full sun. It's the furthest away from this tree on the edge of the property. It gets about 7 hours of sun, so it's getting the perfect amount of sun that it needs. Then as we walk further towards the fence and towards these overhanging branches, you can see these tomato plants get a little bit more shade. They're still healthy, they've still got plenty of tomatoes, but they're not as big and bushy as the one that's in full sun. And then as we continue walking towards the edge of the property, we come to an area that has a lot of overhanging branches and a lot more shade. Look how puny and little that tomato plant is. It only has about 4 or 5 tomatoes on it from the entire growing season, and its stem is so tiny that it is actually leaning against the tomato cage for support. Luckily, I still got enough fruit from the plants that were in full sun to have plenty of tomatoes to enjoy this year. So learn from my mistake and make sure your vegetables are getting at least 6 hours of sun. More is even better. To determine how much sun your plants are getting in a certain spot, just make a note of what time the sun first hits this plant. Right now it's about 10:30 and the sun is just starting to hit this tomato plant. Also make a note of what time the sun leaves the spot for good and calculate the hours in between in that span. Also be aware that sun patterns can change from year to year. That's how I ended up with that tomato plant in the wrong spot. What happened is that last year it was getting a little bit more than 6 hours of sun. The branches overhead grew, and this year it's getting a little less than 6 hours of sun, which makes a huge, huge difference. If you have a spot in your garden that's not quite getting 6 hours of sun and you still want to plant vegetables there, try spinach or lettuce. They are shade-tolerant plants and they can handle a little bit of afternoon shade.